Human beings are wired for stability. We're wired for safety. We're wired to, as long as our environment can make us comfortable and we seek comfort and equilibrium, that we feel like everything's okay. And this is one of the great attributes of human civilization, what's allowed it to thrive and flourish and become so complex. It's literally built into our brains and how we manage threats. So the guy running through the jungle, he sees a tiger, he immediately goes into flight or fight mode. He immediately is totally present with that threat. But once he's away from the threat, his mind very quickly edits the threat away and returns to a sense of safety and normalcy. And this is because we evolved, running from dangers in jungles and other humans, where we needed to do that, but we didn't want to be in that mode all of the time. And so this has led to human beings having a very unique nature in that when we see a threat and when we're aware of it, we can react to it very quickly and very efficiently. But existential threats that are difficult for us to understand or not as immediately present are very difficult for the human mind to process. So this is one of the reasons of why in our modern world it's become so difficult for us to tackle so many of the problems we have. Because until the problem presents itself as a real problem, it's very difficult for humans to conceptualize that the problem is even real. So when we talk about food safety and the nature of where our food comes from and how we're taking care of our resources and how we're being taken care of, people like me get up and we represent this message that things have to change. But it's difficult for any of the people that we're talking to really grasp, and that's not an insult, but just to grasp how necessary and how much danger we are in right now in the world. And it's because even with all the problems in the world today, you can walk outside, you can go to a movie, you can go buy a beer, you can go to a restaurant, you can have a great afternoon with your family or your girlfriend or whatever. In fact, in the 1980s, there were studies done of one of the reasons why there was so little political instability or political violence in the United States. And the FBI study basically came back with it was beer, pizza, and cigarettes. The fact that alcohol, food, and luxury items like cigarettes were so readily available inside the United States that it basically made people too comfortable to want to try and change anything. You can read about the sleeper cells that the Soviet Union sent over in the 50s and the 60s. One of the biggest problems they'd have with the sleeper cells they put over was after a couple of years of being in American culture, they didn't want to fight a war with America anymore. They'd become too accustomed to the standard of living here and enjoyed it too much. And no amount of propaganda or conditioning or pre-programming could change that once they were here in the United States for any amount of time, they didn't want to go back to the Soviet Union. Because what did the Soviet Union have to offer them as a quality of life that they had here? So it's this reaffirming thing that comfort and abundance breeds apathy. It breeds people that are incapable of understanding the need for change. So then you look at the story of history over and over and over again, and what is it? It's about civilizations that operate a certain way that is efficient and effective for the populations of those civilizations and societies. And they operate efficiently for long periods of time until usually some outside force, most of the time, honestly, nature, climate change. You can look in the history of the world, fall of the Roman Republic, fall of Chinese emperors, and you come across again that it's always in periods of the climate changing that you end up having the empires fall, that you end up having times of great change approach. And it's because the way things had been operating that people were comfortable with for the long period of time, they gradually hit this point where all of a sudden it stops working. It stops working, and then when that stops working, people start questioning how things are working in totality. And then people come to power because they come to the masses and they say, hey, this isn't working, we need to change. And a generation before, if those people had shown up, they would have been completely ignored. Because why? Because things were working. Because things were flowing smoothly. Because people had their beer, their pizza, their luxury items, their cigarettes. We're entering a period now of accelerated change that's being brought about primarily because of political instability, economic instability, that's all being pushed forward by changes in weather patterns worldwide that are affecting how our food is being produced. That's affecting how populations migrate around the earth. So today there's 3 articles that I wanted to specifically address. Earth is about to enter a 30-year mini ice age. Africa's worst locust plague in decades threatens millions. And Elon Musk wants to connect your brain to a computer with Neuralink. Now, what do these 3 articles have to do with one another? The first 2 are obviously related in that climate change is accelerating worldwide. That is a fact that's happening. There are more extreme weather events occurring than have ever occurred before. The weather is increasingly becoming colder in some regions, hotter in others, but it's shifting. So areas that were cold are getting warmer, areas that were warmer are getting cold, and extreme weather events along the movements of these zones of weather moving are causing 1,000-year rain events, are causing population migration among human beings, and causing migration among insects and animal populations, and explosions of those types of populations in areas that they had never occurred before, or have occurred historically, cyclically, with these cycles in the sun. So Africa's worst locust plague. Well, you can track these types of locust plagues occurring along with cycles in the sun that we can verify from the geological record, from ice core samples, from ancient Chinese and European texts, that we know that the sun goes through specific cycles where it creates less energy on the planet and causes shifts in weather patterns. This has happened over and over and over again. I mean, the idea that the sun wouldn't be the primary driver of weather on Earth, when we know it's the primary driver of all life and all weather on the planet, is absolutely ludicrous, but it doesn't fit with a political narrative that wants to address all climate change as being driven by humans. Now, side note, does that mean that we shouldn't be endeavoring to live more in tune with nature? No, 100% we should be living in tune with nature. But there are political agendas that have to do with taxation and political parties and controlling and manipulating business and taxes, both by the left and the right, that have completely clouded this issue and almost paralyzed us to have any kind of effective, true dialogue about addressing any of the real problems that are happening. The acidification of the oceans on the planet is one of the most dangerous, fundamental threats to all human life on the planet, completely ignored. Why? Because it doesn't serve a political agenda. The fact that China, India, and Eastern Africa are creating something like 70-80% of world pollution that's going into the plastic pollution and ocean pollution that's going into the oceans. Totally unaddressed. Nobody talks about it. No political movement. No movement in the home countries that are creating that problem. No movement in the progressive countries of the West to solve that problem. Why? Because it doesn't serve a political agenda. The very corporations that are the ones financing these political agendas are the same corporations that end up benefiting from those political agendas, or the governments or the political parties that push them. It's all very formulaic. But when you peel back the facade and look beneath it, you discover that the fundamental problems that we're facing that are destroying ecosystems worldwide aren't being addressed. And again, because it's not politically expedient. It doesn't serve anyone's political agenda. And unless it serves someone's political agenda, nobody's going to put money and effort behind it. So, the rape and destruction of the biosphere around the planet continues unabated, while we in our home countries debate plastic straws going into the ocean, which when the reality is the U.S. has some of the least amount per capita of plastic pollution going to the ocean of any of the industrialized nations on the planet. Yet here we're launching entire social movements to deal with a problem that we're doing the best at while not addressing the true progenitors of the problem. You follow? So there are billions of locusts right now in East Africa threatening the food supply of the Middle East and East Africa. By all accounts, looking at the geological record, Earth is getting ready to enter into a cooling period that could last anywhere from 30 years to 100 years. The last grand solar minimum, the Maunder minimum, lasted 70 years and affected temperatures like what we're seeing right now, again, worldwide, affected growing seasons worldwide. When we enter into, people should research all of this, but to give a quick update of how this works, when the Earth enters many ice ages, it's not that all of a sudden ice just descends from the north and starts blanketing everything. It's that your growing seasons get shorter. The fall cold snaps come earlier. The spring cold snaps last later. You have torrential downpours one year, droughts the next year, 1,000-year rain events that start occurring on a regular basis. This is what happens. This is the period that we're getting ready to enter into. Now, what does that have to do with Elon Musk brain chips? Well, I'll tell you. The instability of our times that will only continue to accelerate. Economic instability, political instability, geological instability. There are more massive geological events that are occurring more rapidly every year right now. And that tracks with the grand solar minimum, that whenever the sun goes quiet in these periods, that there's more volcanoes erupt, there's more geological activity that occurs on the planet. This is all cyclical. This has all happened before, and it's happening again now. And we can look to history. We don't have to have computer models that rely on human inputs to tell us what's going to happen, when we can look backwards in history and see exactly what has happened on this planet. And see that there are cycles to the sun, and that these cycles in the sun affect everything. Now, the instability that we're dealing with now, and that we will continue to deal with, will only offer two choices moving into the future. In one of those choices, humanity continues to capitulate its power and give it up to a minority of people that will utilize machines to deal with these problems, to create greater economies of scale and more concentrations of power that allow them to have all of the power and control. Or we will utilize this technology to set ourselves free and return power to humanity. When you look at what's going on in China today, and that's going to date this video, but it's fine, because no matter what event is happening from this point forward into the future, there will always be one question. Do we give up our power to the power of corporations and the state, or do we take it back? There is no other question. Now, right now in China, there's something, they just locked down another city in an attempt to contain the virus's spread. So the quarantine area will spread jump from 50 million people to now 75 million people. Eventually, the whole country is probably going to be on lockdown. And they have everybody in their homes. It's the most extensive quarantine that's ever taken place in human history. Drones flying through the streets, telling people to stay in their homes, spraying gas, chlorine gas everywhere, trying to disinfect everything, flying out into the countryside and finding farmers not wearing face masks, and a drone starts barking at them with a policeman's voice telling them to get inside or to put their face masks on. This is the future now. We are already here. The takeover of humanity by a small group of people utilizing technology to control the masses. That is happening right now. Free speech online is being decimated and controlled right now. And it begins with, speech that nobody wants to hear. It begins with things that and that's always how the systems of control are put into place, is the controllers come to the population and they say, oh, look over here, that guy, what he's saying, that problem, we need to get rid of him. And they find the most repugnant, ignorant people or messages or ideas, and they say, we got to get rid of that. But that's where control begins. So we're on the verge with these systems that we are one crisis away. We're one event away for these systems to be turned on the people and utilized to absolutely control them. One of my favorite novels, one of my favorite movies growing up was Dune by Frank Herbert. And in the extended edition of Dune, they reference in the books, and they talk about something really interesting. If you've ever seen Dune, it's a science fiction film and based on a book series that takes place thousands of years in the future of humanity, when there's multiple planets and a feudal system that's spread across the entire universe. But in it, there's no robots. There's no computers. And the reason for that, in the backstory that's given, is that at one point in humanity's past, people that had robots and computers were able to utilize the robots and the computers to take over civilization. And that a small minority of people were able to control everyone else and enslave everyone else. Because whoever had control of the robots had control of civilization itself. This kind of power structure has never existed in the history of the world. This kind of technology has never existed. Imagine what Hitler or Stalin or Mao could have done with Facebook, or with automated robots and drones able to enforce their will. This is beyond 1984. This is beyond anything that has previously even been imagined. So, who knows what will happen with the coronavirus? Who knows what will happen if it spreads? Or if it's eliminated and then it's the next event. A volcano, a geological event, an economic collapse. It doesn't matter what it is or where it comes from. There is only one fundamental question of our time, is will the people have control over their own destiny or not? Because as each one of these events occur, we accelerate down the path of giving up our sovereignty, giving up control of our world. I'm old enough that I was a young man on September 11th, 2001. And they said that day our world changed forever, and it did. The introduction of the national intelligence state and it becoming public, and its legitimization of its intrusion into every aspect of our lives. The introduction of the surveillance state and its pervasive and complete overthrow of privacy in our time. When the Homeland Security Act was passed, when these systems were developed, We were told that they would never be used to track and trace us. We were told that we would never be spied on. When now it is completely commonplace for everyone to understand that every electronic device that they have around them is cataloging them, spying on them, taking every bit of data that it can absorb from them. And that data, that information, is some of the most valuable information ever to be processed, because it allows you to understand how entire populations think and react to information and stimuli in real time. And now with computers having the capability of actually processing all of that information, distilling it, and allowing it to give you equitable equations of how individuals or populations will react. And every day it grows. Facebook, Google, the NSA, probably foreign governments and foreign intelligence agencies, all building constant algorithms on populations and individuals. And every day, that depth of that penetration of understanding of individual human psychology and group human psyche is increasing. And we blithely and naively just march along with this and allow it to continue and allow it to accelerate. And why? Because we cannot recognize that it is a danger. Because we have too much beer, cigarettes, and pizza. These systems are designed to, on one hand, to completely anesthetize us, to completely bypass our sense of self-preservation, to turn us into the most narcissistic, self-absorbed, self-aggrandizing, empty, feeding creatures as possibly can, looking for the next hit. The apps on your phone, Facebook, the games that we play, the media that we watch, so much of it psychologically designed to hypnotize us, to put us into trance states. Your television, by the very nature of how it operates, the part of your brain that processes moving images is the same part of your brain that engages in critical thinking. So when you're watching a series of moving images, which is what your television is showing you. It's a picture followed by a picture that they're being played in such a sequence. It's like the flip book, like that they had you make when you were a kid. There's no real movement on a television. You're just watching a series of photographs. But those series of photographs are playing so quickly, they blend together and simulate true motion, like what you perceive in reality. But see, in reality, when you perceive true motion, it doesn't access the same part of your brain. It's a very subtle trick that goes along with how your brain functions. Because in real life isn't a series of photographs. Real life is a continuous fluid motion of reality. Maybe at a quantum level, but who knows, or who truly understands that. But it still fundamentally affects how your brain works in a very different way. So when you're watching a series of moving images, the part of your brain that engages in critical thinking switches off, and that processor then starts engaging in processing the series of images in front of you. That's just one aspect of how all of this works. So then on top of that, the delivery system itself physically bypasses part of your critical thinking, and we haven't even discussed the nature of the programming involved designed to affect how you, once that information, it's bypassing your filter to critically examine it, and then is injecting an idea directly into your subconscious. The games that people play, the social media that we engage with, have been designed to give you dopamine rushes. This is why people are addicted to video games. This is why people are addicted to social media, because it has been designed to make you addicted to it. So human beings are running around in this system that has provided them with more than has ever been provided in the history of the world. We eat better than the Roman emperors and the Chinese emperors. We have more leisure time than the nobility of Europe at the height of feudalism. We engage in less physical, strenuous activity than pretty much any generation that has ever existed on the history of the planet. Per capita. I know there are very hardworking people out there. But as the world civilization right now, there's more abundance, and especially in the West, there's more abundance. There's more information. And then you have all these digital toys that are literally scientifically designed to suck you in and get you as involved with them as possible at the exclusion of all else. So, as always, what does it become? We are sleepwalking into a future where, because we do not take responsibility for our lives, because we do not take our own power back, we capitulate it to these systems. And these systems, which we have birthed, which we have created, are slowly absorbing us. Are slowly capturing the human spirit and its essence itself. There's a term I always use, which is delta, which is an organism will not change till the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same. And the problem is these systems have been designed to take away all pain and all choice at the same time. So we willingly give ourselves over to the vampire because we have invited it in. Not only have we invited it in, we have created it and then invited it in to consume us, to consume our very essence, our humanity. This is why people are so unhappy. This is why people are so psychologically sick. This is why people are so dysfunctional. Is because they have no true connection with reality. They have no true connection with nature. They have no true connection with their own power. They're all stumbling around, blind, grasping for something that they can't even understand what they're trying to find. Another analogy would be they're starving to death, and in front of them is this feast of candy. But candy that has zero nutritional value. It's actually like candy that sucks the life out of you as you eat it. So it tastes good, and you stuff your face with it, but as you're stuffing your face with it, you're literally dying, and it's sucking the life right out of you. That's what's happening to most people in the world today. And so here comes Elon Musk, who wants to surgically implant our brains. And this is the final capitulation of humanity. The self. We've given our privacy. We've given our freedoms. We've given our responsibility. We've given our power. We've given our labor. We've given everything to these systems. And in return, it's given us entertainment. It's given us luxury. It's given us self-aggrandizement. Everyone wants to be an artist today. I've been an artist my whole life. And there's an element to it that's beautiful. But everyone has some narcissistic ambition. Everyone that's on social media wants to be something that gives them some kind of importance. And we should want those things. But when those things become the center of life, when entertainment and narcissism and self-aggrandizement become the center of all life, then the human soul is dead. And this is part of the truth of living, is the fact is the further we get away from having to deal with our own survival and those issues are solved, this dysfunction seems to grow. And it seems to be a pattern in history that the more abundant a civilization is and the more abundant people are, the more fallen they become, because they lose track of the side of truth. They lose track of the side of what really matters. And that's the time that we're living in now. That people, and this isn't everyone, there's plenty of good people out there, and there's plenty of good people that realize this, but there's enough. There's enough because of these systemic problems that we have. Over entertainment, a detachment from truth, a detachment from reality, from nature and our own power. The more people become this, the more the dysfunction within the entire society grows. So we've become disconnected from our reality. We've become disconnected from the true threats that face us, that they become mere concepts, that they become existential ideas that we can't even truly understand as being real. You know, acidification of the ocean, what does that mean when I can go get sushi tonight? There's a food crisis? What does that mean when I can go eat anything I want? This is America. We can have anything we want. But what people don't see and don't understand is yeah, you're on a luxury bus, and you're sitting inside that bus and there's a buffet, but that bus itself is driving towards a cliff. And I'm the guy that's like sitting there like that cliff looks like it's getting pretty close over there. But the cliff is just a picture in a window while we're sitting here in this buffet in front of us. And so that's what a lot of people that are sitting there, they're like, wow, you know, this food's really good. And I'm like, look at that cliff over there. And they're like, yeah, but this food's really good. This is what's real. You see, the food inside the luxury bus is what's real. The threat of the cliff is just a picture on a wall. And until the bus goes over the cliff and we're all sitting there floating and starting to experience the reality of like falling, the truth is the way the human brain and the way human civilization is designed is until that event occurs, people cannot be bothered to worry about it. And the truth is maybe there is no avoiding it. Maybe we have to go over the cliff. Maybe humanity has to experience what it isn't supposed to be so it can decide what it will be. And so maybe so much of these messages are messages in a bottle for the future. And I think about that all the time. The idea that I'm speaking into the wind and that I'm putting these ideas out there, saying that we could change things now, saying that we could have an impact now, saying that things could be different now, but that the organism will not change until the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same. So there is some truth that maybe trying to fight human nature is too much. And maybe we are just laying the groundwork so that when we do have to experience this, that we will have at least conceptualized enough of the discussion beforehand that the pain and the trauma that will be forced on us can be mitigated to the best degree. So much of what I do and what I think about is about the future. That's why we have our campaign, Feed the Future. I have two sons, 6 and 7 years old. And last year, when my oldest boy graduated kindergarten, I went and I watched his graduation, and it was all these young kids singing Over the Rainbow. And it was so fundamentally beautiful to me watching how innocent all of those children were and how hopeful they were being taught to be about their future. And I was thinking about in that moment just how much I wanted to protect all of those kids, because in every one of them I saw my own children. In the face of, if you've ever had your own children, you suddenly discover that you care a lot more about other people's children than you ever have before. Because you start to see your child in every other child. And you start to see that beautiful innocence and that beautiful hopefulness that children just carry naturally with them. And you want to protect that. I truly hope for the best and the brightest future for all of the children of humanity. And that's the reason that I'm doing this. That's the reason I invented the Life Pod. I started Eden. I've devoted my life to the idea that my children will have a human future. That they will not be plugged in like the Borg into some mass control system designed by Facebook and controlled by Google algorithms. That my children will live in a human future where the police are not drones and robots flying through the skies, controlling them and telling them where they can go and where they can be and how they can live, under Chinese social credit scoring systems that the UN has already adopted for worldwide integration. That is not a future that any of us want. And if we want to take back our future, if we want to have a future worth living, then it begins with us taking control of how we create our food, our water, and our power. That is the only pathway to freedom. In the face of mounting catastrophe and mounting instability, it is the only road that we can take, that we can end up in a human future. So much of control of civilization for the remainder of the world will be between those who decide to merge with machines, who decide to genetically edit their children, and between those of us that are determined to live a human life. Which life do you want? Which future do you want? A future where you're submerged completely and give up all autonomy into the system of control? Or a future where you, in the greatest sense of what it is to be human, embark on the ultimate journey of reclaiming your power and your individuality? Which one will you choose?